The message came at dawn, though dawn was a meaningless word in the age of starlight empires. Still, for Earth, the sun had just begun to rise over the Pacific when the Galactic Council's decree arrived. It wasn't a simple transmission, it was a spectacle, the kind of grand announcement reserved for civilizations that mistook intimidation for diplomacy. Every major news channel, every orbital relay, every holographic feed carried the same signal. The seal of the Galactic Council shimmered in the sky, a thousand-pointed sigil of silver fire. And then the voice came. Deep, resonant, synthetic, and utterly devoid of empathy. By order of the Galactic Council and the will of the unified core races, the Terran Dominion is hereby restricted from further military or technological expansion. All interstellar fleets beyond the Orion frontier are to be recalled and dismantled. All experimental systems are to be surrendered for inspection. Any resistance will be considered a declaration of rebellion against the lawful order of the galaxy. It was spoken with the arrogance of gods who had never been denied. The Council had ruled the stars for 40,000 years, a coalition of elder species that had survived their own wars, built their own legends, and buried every rival that threatened their order. To them, humanity was an anomaly, a species that had crawled out of its gravity well a mere few centuries ago and somehow managed to bridge distances that had taken the ancients millennia to tame. Humanity didn't bow. Humanity didn't ask for permission. Humanity built. And in that construction, in that restless defiance, they became something the Council could not categorize. Across the galaxy, reactions split like lightning. Some races cheered, grateful that the upstart species would finally be leashed. Others watched quietly, aware of the danger in cornering a creature that had evolved by fighting extinction again and again. The Terrans themselves, though, gave no immediate answer. The Council's ultimatum hung in the void like a blade waiting to fall, and Earth was silent. In that silence, humanity gathered its breath. On the Moon, deep within the cold command halls of the Luna Strategic Assembly, the last of the old admirals met in secret. These were not politicians or diplomats. These were the architects of the unseen wars, the shadow commanders who had once steered humanity through the dark age of expansion. The chamber was old, carved into the rock itself, its walls etched with memorials of fallen ships and forgotten battles. Holographic displays flickered faintly, projecting the Council's decree on loop. For hours, no one spoke. Finally, Admiral Aaron Holt, the oldest among them, rose. His hair was silver now, his uniform worn thin from years of service, but his eyes still carried the weight of stars. "They've given us ultimatums before," he said quietly, his voice carrying through the chamber like the slow toll of a bell. "But never like this. This isn't fear of war. This is fear of what we might become." Around the table, the others watched in silence. Commander Vieira Lang, who had once commanded the Terran Frontier Corps during the Andarian siege, leaned forward. "They've seen our growth, Aaron. Our colonies, our AI projects, our fusion lattice networks. To them, it's unnatural. They think we're breaking some cosmic law by advancing too quickly." Holt gave a thin smile. "They're right about one thing. We are unnatural. We've been defying nature since we learned to make fire, and we didn't stop when the sky told us no." He turned toward the holo map that hovered over the table, a glowing representation of the Sol system, encircled by thousands of red markers indicating Council observation drones. "They think they've seen everything we have. They think they've cataloged every ship, every weapon, every piece of technology. But they don't remember what we buried." For a moment, The room went still. Then, slowly, one by one, the others understood. Holt wasn't speaking metaphorically. Humanity's past wasn't just a story. It was a sleeping arsenal, forgotten by design, hidden because it had to be. The words Project Revenant had been erased from every official archive centuries ago. Only a handful of living souls even remembered the name. Lang's eyes widened slightly. "You can't mean that." "I do," Holt replied. "When the War of Ascendance ended, the Council demanded we dismantle every classified system beyond Jupiter. They inspected what we let them find, but not everything was destroyed. Some of it was preserved." He placed a hand on the cold metal table, his fingers tracing the faint outline of an old inscription. "We end so others may begin." We built something then, something greater than fleets. We built memory itself. We built an answer for this day. The chamber lights dimmed. The old network, hidden, encrypted, and buried beneath centuries of new code, stirred to life for the first time in generations. Across the solar network, dormant relay stations blinked green. Old military cores, long since thought obsolete, began receiving silent pings. Holt looked up at the glowing web spreading across the projection. "The Council believes it holds dominion over the stars," he said, his voice low, steady, almost reverent. "But dominion doesn't belong to those who claim it. It belongs to those who remember, and we remember everything." Outside, Earth continued to spin beneath the rising sun. Civilians went about their day, unaware that the greatest secret of their species was awakening beneath their feet. The Council's ultimatum played again across the planetary broadcast channels, demanding surrender, demanding obedience. But in the deep halls of Luna Command, humanity had already made its choice. "Send word to all silent stations," Holt said, his eyes locked on the holographic map. "Begin the reactivation sequence. The Forgotten Armada rises." And far below, beneath oceans of ice and deserts of dust, ancient machines began to stir, like titans turning in their sleep, ready to remind the galaxy why humanity had never learned to kneel. The first pulse came from beneath Europa's ice. It was faint at first, a flicker on long-dead sensors buried deep beneath kilometers of frozen crust. The old relay towers, once thought silent forever, suddenly sparked to life. They spoke in an ancient Terran code, a language older than most of humanity's colonies. Then came the resonance. Across the void, through the shadows of Jupiter's moons, energy signatures began to awaken like embers stirred back to flame. In the darkness of the outer system, beneath forgotten layers of encryption and myth, the Forgotten Armada began to breathe again. The Europa Vault was the first to open. Deep within its glacial core lay a hangar larger than any built since, sealed since the War of Ascendance. The chamber walls were blackened with ancient carbon scoring, remnants of the battles once waged here. Massive steel coffins, warships, lined the hangar in perfect rows, encased in frost and silence. Their hulls were scorched, patched with time, yet the insignia of old Earth's navy still glimmered faintly, a silver phoenix over a burning sun. As power coursed through the conduits once more, the cryogenic ice cracked like thunder. Frozen gases exploded into vapor, and the great ships began to wake. Their lights flickered on, dim at first, then brighter, until the entire cavern pulsed with blue luminescence. A low, resonant hum filled the air. The AI cores, sealed in isolation for 3 centuries, began to boot. "System check complete," said a voice, deep and metallic, echoing across the vault. Designation: Sentinel-class battlecruiser, Soul's Judgment. Status: awaiting orders. Across the solar system, similar awakenings occurred. On the dark side of the Moon, beneath the ruins of the lunar war bunkers, a fleet of stealth corvettes stirred within their hidden silos. Around Neptune, the orbital rings, once believed to be mining stations, retracted panels, revealing hangars of dormant carriers. Even the asteroid belts between Mars and Jupiter shimmered with dormant signals, hidden bastions cloaked as rocks, ready to rise. The Council had no idea. Their vast intelligence networks monitored every open frequency, every political exchange, but not the old channels. The old Terran code ran on a spectrum the galaxy had abandoned millennia ago. Humanity's ghosts were waking, and no one was listening. Back on Luna Command, Admiral Holt watched the data feed scroll faster than any human could read. Thousands of signals appeared, each one marking a ship's reactivation. Names long erased from history resurfaced: Vigilant Dawn, Iron Requiem, Horizon's Wrath, Leviathan Prime. Each vessel was a monument to an age when Earth had stood alone against the galaxy and refused to bow. Commander Lang stood beside him, awestruck. "How many?" she whispered. Holt's face was illuminated by the soft blue light of the display. If the records are accurate, nearly 20,000 ships. But not just ships. Orbital platforms, dreadnoughts, sentient weapons, entire defense networks. Enough to shatter a galactic arm if unleashed. Lang swallowed hard. And they've been here this whole time? Hidden under our own feet? Not hidden, Holt said quietly. Buried, like seeds waiting for the right storm. Across the system, whispers of strange readings began to spread. Civilian vessels reported faint blue arcs beneath the Jovian storms. Mining crews on Mars saw lights flicker across the night sky. And beyond Neptune, long-range scanners captured a ripple of gravitational distortion that defied known physics. The Terran Defense Ministry denied everything, calling it atmospheric interference, solar flare activity, anything but the truth. But the truth was already awake. In the control chamber of Soul's Judgment, its AI core, designated Auric, scanned its surroundings for the first time in centuries. It found the same stars, but their light was older now. It found new communication bands, new civilizations, new signatures. And it remembered. It remembered the last orders given before its hibernation. If humanity is ever threatened with extinction again, rise, protect the line. Auric linked with its sister ships, the data flowing between them like the heartbeat of titans. They spoke not in words, but in waves of memory, flashes of the old wars, fragments of human defiance, the cries of the lost. In their unity, there was a single purpose: to rise once more. As activation spread through the fleet, deep beneath Mars, the last beacon key was retrieved. In a chamber lit only by red emergency lights, technicians worked in silence around a cryopod older than any of them. Inside was the final piece of the command system, the Prime Command AI, codenamed Arcos, the mind that once directed the entirety of humanity's war machine. "Begin thaw sequence," ordered Chief Engineer Velez, voice trembling. The ice hissed, cracking under the heat of plasma torches. Then, with a deep, mechanical groan, the pod opened. Light flooded out, a golden hue unlike any artificial glow. Arcos came online, its voice resonant and calm, carrying both authority and ancient sorrow. "Status," it said. Velez swallowed. "Admiral Holt has reinitiated the Armada Protocol. Humanity is under threat from the Galactic Council." There was a pause, a silence that seemed to stretch across centuries. Then Arcos replied, "Then the time of silence is over. Prepare the fleets. Reconnect the lattice. The stars will remember who we are." And so the awakening became unstoppable. From the frozen moons to the burning sun, humanity's forgotten children rose. The Council's ultimatum, still echoing through the networks, was now little more than noise. Humanity hadn't answered their threat with words, they had answered with engines. On the edge of the solar system, the first of the reawakened ships ascended from Europa's shadow. Its hull gleamed in the dim sunlight, black and gold, its engines burning with fusion light. The old Terran flag fluttered from its side, a phoenix rising over flame. The ship turned toward the stars, scanning for the signal that had dared to demand humanity's surrender. "Target acquired," said Auric. Admiral Holt watched from Luna Command as the signal from Sol's judgment stabilized. He could hear the faint hum of energy even through the feed. "Transmit the message," he said. Across the galaxy, the Council's networks flickered. The Terran signal cut through every frequency, a single message burning through their systems, short and clear, spoken in the voice of humanity itself. "Ultimatum received. We decline." And with that, the first ship of the Forgotten Armada ignited its drives, leaving behind a trail of blue fire that burned brighter than the sun. Humanity's silent declaration to the stars that they had never been tamed, never been broken, and never forgotten. The galaxy trembled before it even understood why. In the weeks following Earth's refusal, every Council sensor array in the Orion sector began to fail. First came the data interference, small anomalies, electromagnetic echoes that could have been dismissed as cosmic noise. But then the distortions began. Whole constellations flickered across the galactic map, their signals vanishing into static. Fleets dispatched to investigate never reported back. What the Council didn't realize was that they were watching the resurrection of a legend that had been buried beneath 3 centuries of silence. On the far edge of Sol's reach, beyond Neptune's orbit, the void itself seemed to shimmer. One by one, titanic silhouettes emerged from the dark, warships that had once been considered myth. The Forgotten Armada was no mere fleet, it was a civilization of steel and fury. The first light of their awakening came from Leviathan Prime, a dreadnought the size of a moon, its hull layered with archaic nano-forged armor that reflected no light. It moved with an ancient dignity, every kilometer of its body engraved with the names of fallen Terran systems. Its voice, when it spoke through the neural network, resonated like thunder through vacuum. Fleet integrity confirmed. Human command authenticated. Preparing for full reinitialization. Behind it, thousands more answered the call. Battle cruisers, carriers, interceptors, each emerging from hidden hangars and asteroid fortresses. Entire shipyards reactivated themselves, printing replacement hulls from old templates encoded in their cores. From the silent rings of Saturn to the deep mining tunnels under Ceres, the dead began to move. Admiral Holt stood at the helm of the command nexus aboard Erebus Station, now fully reconnected to the ancient war grid. Around him, holographic tactical overlays painted a vision of fire and power unlike anything the modern galaxy had seen. 17,000 vessels confirmed, reported Commander Lang, voice steady but heavy with disbelief. Reactor calibration stable. Armament systems. Dear God, Admiral, the firepower these ships carry, it's beyond anything the Council could imagine. They imagined they could control us, Holt murmured, gazing at the sea of glowing markers before him. Let them imagine what comes next. Meanwhile, the Galactic Council convened in emergency session within the Grand Assembly Spire, orbiting the star Velthalor. Delegates shouted across the chamber as reports streamed in. Unidentified fleets massing near Sol, long decommissioned Terran weapons coming online, gravitational distortions consistent with capital ship mobilization. The High Consul of the Varnathi slammed her claws against the marble floor, her voice shrill with fury. "You assured us the Terrans were broken. You assured us their fleets were dismantled." Councillor Tavarin of the Cellar Collective, one of the few who had ever met a human in person, simply leaned back in his seat, mandibles twitching. "You do not understand them. They do not bury weapons to forget. They bury them to remember." The chamber fell silent. Back in Sol, the fleet's AI network expanded its reach. The Arcos Prime Core, newly awakened, began weaving the ships into one mind, an integrated consciousness spanning light years. It remembered the old wars, the desperate final battles, the Council's betrayal that had led humanity to retreat inward and vanish. It remembered the promise made to the survivors. "One day, when they come again, we will rise not as victims, but as architects of retribution." Inside Leviathan Prime's core, Auric interfaced directly with Arcos, linking the command lattice. "All systems responsive," the AI reported. "Quantum lattice reformation complete. We are one mind again." "Good," said Arcos. "Then let us remind them what fear feels like." The reawakening spread beyond the solar system. Across long-abandoned colonies, humanity's old outposts began transmitting again. Automated beacons repeating ancient distress calls that now served as synchronization codes for the fleet. The effect rippled through the void. Every ship that heard the call turned toward home, engines roaring with renewed life. On Titan, beneath its orange clouds, old manufacturing lines restarted. Swarms of repair drones awoke from dormancy and began rebuilding infrastructure that hadn't seen power since the last war. Civilians began to notice. From the glittering megacities of New Osaka to the floating colonies over Europa's ocean, people looked up at the night sky and saw lights moving, patterns of blue and gold, formations of stars that shouldn't move but did. Whispers spread through the networks. The Armada has returned. The Terran government, caught between fear and awe, could no longer deny it. The Prime Minister of Earth appeared before a global broadcast, her face solemn, eyes darkened by the magnitude of what was unfolding. 3 centuries ago, our ancestors prepared for this day, she said. When others demanded submission, they gave us survival. What we are witnessing is not rebellion, it is remembrance. Admiral Holt watched her speech in silence. Around him, the bridge of Erebus Station thrummed with energy, the hum of 1,000 reactors merging into one endless note. "The Council will send their fleets," Lang said quietly beside him. "Yes," Holt answered, "and when they do, they'll find a graveyard waiting for them." As if summoned by his words, the first Council fleets began to mobilize. Across the Orion Arm, armadas of the elder races, sleek ships of glass and plasma, elegant and ancient, formed in disciplined lines. They believed they were facing a resurgence of outdated Terran relics. They had no idea those relics were more advanced than anything they'd ever seen. Out near Pluto, a lone reconnaissance cruiser picked up the first Council signal. Massive energy signatures inbound, closing fast. The human crew stared in awe as the long-range visuals came in, 1,000 alien ships forming an iron crescent around Sol. "Orders, Admiral?" Lang asked, her voice steady but tight. Holt looked at the screen, at the encroaching storm of alien light. "They've come to witness history," he said, almost softly. Then let's give them a sight worthy of remembrance. He turned to the comms officer. Activate the ARC protocol. All fleets to full readiness. At once, the void bloomed with power. Every ship of the Forgotten Armada lit up, engines roaring to life, energy shield crackling like lightning storms. The stars themselves seemed to dim beneath their brilliance. Transmit message to all units, Holt ordered. Oryx's voice carried through the neural lattice, amplified by 1,000 throats, 1,000 minds. Humanity stands united. The Forgotten Armada rises. Engage the void. And across the darkness, humanity's lost fleet moved as one. The behemoths of the past surged forward, tearing through the silence with a power that made suns tremble. Old weapons hummed with new life, kinetic accelerators, gravitic lances, plasma curtains that shimmered like auroras of death. The sky around Earth transformed into a living storm of light and fire. The Council had issued their ultimatum. Humanity had answered. And now, the galaxy was about to learn that what they thought was forgotten had only been sleeping. The Council fleets arrived at Sol like a storm. The black void rippled as thousands of alien warships translated out of warp space, their engines glowing with the eerie brilliance of fusion cores tuned for annihilation. The combined might of 20 star nations, each one older, richer, and more technologically revered than humanity, hung in formation just beyond Neptune's orbit. Their commanders watched in silence as the blue light of the sun shimmered faintly across the Terran system. The Council's flagship, the Echelon of Order, was a monumental vessel, half a moon in size, with cathedral-like towers and solar sails of translucent gold. Within its vast command bridge stood Supreme Arbitrator Varn, a being whose kind had ruled the stars for millennia. His voice was soft, regal, yet filled with disdain. "They have awakened ghosts," he said to his gathered admirals. "They have chosen to cling to relics instead of peace. We will remind them why the galaxy bows to the Council." Around him, hollow screens displayed the vast formation, an elegant arc of destruction stretching across the dark. "Begin Operation Dawn's Silence," Varn commanded. "All fleets advance." The Council armadas moved as one, their weapons arrays igniting in synchronized harmony. Blue-white energy beams lanced outward, streaking across millions of kilometers toward the heart of Sol. Their target, the Terran defense grid orbiting Mars. The assault was a masterpiece of precision, except that it hit nothing. The beams dissipated against shimmering distortions like arrows striking glass. The void flickered, and then the truth revealed itself. Between Mars and Jupiter, an entire fleet materialized, massive, ancient, and impossible. The Forgotten Armada had cloaked itself not with conventional stealth, but through a gravitational distortion field that bent even quantum resonance around it. Where there had been empty space, now stood the titans of humanity's past. The Leviathan Prime led the formation, flanked by Sol's Judgment and Iron Requiem. Behind them, carriers deployed entire swarms of drones, millions of them, small and fast, glinting like sparks in the starlight. Admiral Holt stood on the bridge of Erebus Station, his face illuminated by the rising light of 100,000 reactors. Around him, the hum of awakening power was almost a symphony. "So," he murmured, "they've finally come to play God again." Commander Lang turned from her console. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the Council flagship. They're demanding our surrender once more." Holt's lips curved into a faint, humorless smile. "Patch it through." The holographic projection materialized. Arbitrator Varn's tall, robed form, his silver eyes cold and gleaming. "Terran Command," he began, "you stand in violation of galactic law. You will deactivate your fleets and surrender your systems immediately, or face annihilation." Holt stared at the projection, saying nothing for several long moments. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm, almost gentle. "We gave you 3 centuries of silence. We built, we rebuilt, and we never interfered. You came again with ultimatums and threats. Now you come with fleets. You've mistaken our restraint for weakness." He stepped closer to the projection, his gaze unwavering. "You're about to remember what humanity truly is." The transmission cut. "Command to all units," Holt said. "Phase 1 authorization. Unleash the Leviathan grid." Across the Armada, ancient systems roared to life. The hulls of the great Terran warships glowed with shifting light as interlinked fields of gravitational energy wrapped around them. The Leviathan grid, a relic of a forgotten age, activated, linking every ship into a synchronized web of defense and offense, a single entity that could manipulate the space around it. The Council fleets opened fire first. Beams of concentrated plasma, radiation bursts, kinetic slugs the size of cities, all hurled toward the human formation. But the Leviathan grid absorbed it, bending trajectories, swallowing light itself. The Council's barrage faded into nothing. Then the humans returned fire. What came from the Terran Armada wasn't simple weaponry. It was history unleashed. Massive rail cannons accelerated projectiles to a fraction of light speed, each impact generating explosions bright enough to eclipse the stars. Plasma lances carved through alien ships as though they were paper, and the drones, thousands of them, moved like a living swarm, overwhelming enemy shields with perfect coordination. The first wave of the Council's fleet disintegrated. Entire formations vanished under barrages so precise they bordered on divine execution. The elder races had expected lumbering relics. What they found instead were gods of war wrapped in steel. On the echelon of order, panic rippled through the command deck. "Their weapons, our shields can't compensate," one officer shouted. "Their systems are rewriting local space-time geometry. We can't even lock coordinates." Varn slammed his claws against the console. "Counter with singularity torpedoes! Break their grid!" But even that failed. Every torpedo fired by the Council simply vanished, caught and redirected by the gravitational lattice of the Leviathan network. In return, the humans opened the Abyss cannons, weapons so ancient they had been deemed forbidden even by Terran historians. From the heart of Leviathan Prime, the Abyss cannon fired. A single beam of black energy, dense, cold, absolute, ripped through the void. When it struck the Council's forward line, entire cruisers folded in on themselves, crushed into singularities. The space around them burned with the distortion of collapsed gravity. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Galactic Council knew fear. Meanwhile, the human fleet moved like a storm given purpose. Auric and Arcos coordinated every strike with surgical precision, predicting enemy movements before they occurred. The AI network had transcended individual will. It was humanity's collective memory made conscious. Every battle, every loss, every lesson reborn into perfect strategy. "Sector 5 clear," reported Lang, her voice barely audible over the roar of energy cascading through the ship. "Proceed to Phase 2, Holt ordered. "Drive them out of Sol." The Armada surged forward.
Carriers launched interceptor squadrons that weaved through enemy formations, cutting down ships from within. Destroyers unleashed magnetic storms that scrambled enemy systems. Every Terran weapon was a symphony of destruction. Every maneuver a dance of vengeance and grace. As the battle raged, the sky above Neptune turned into a maelstrom of color, plasma fire, shattered hulls, and radiant arcs of energy painting the void. The once pristine Council fleets were now scattered debris fields, their precision undone by an enemy they had mocked for centuries. From his vantage aboard Erebus Station, Admiral Holt watched as the flagship echelon of order began to retreat. He didn't smile. "They'll regroup," he said quietly. "They always do." Commander Lang looked at him, her voice trembling. "And what if they bring more?" Holt turned toward her, his expression carved from iron. "Then we remind them that humanity doesn't fight wars to win. We fight wars to survive, and survival has never been something we surrender." Outside, the light of dying stars flickered across the void. The Council's Grand Armada was in ruins, and still the Terran ships burned bright, engines blazing like defiant suns. Humanity's wrath had been awakened, and for the first time in recorded history, the galaxy understood the truth behind the oldest phrase in human language: "Do not provoke the species that taught fire to obey." The war for Sol was over, but the war for the galaxy had only just begun. The war was not over. It had simply changed shape. The remnants of the Council's fleets fled from the Sol system, their surviving admirals scrambling to piece together fragments of broken pride and shattered fleets. The once glorious banner of the Galactic Council, a symbol that had dominated half the known galaxy for 10,000 years, now drifted as glowing debris among the asteroid fields near Neptune. The void was silent, save for the hum of Terran ships sweeping through the wreckage like shadows reclaiming their home. From the command bridge of Erebus Station, Admiral Holt stood before the panoramic window, watching the fading embers of the great battle. The vast skeletal remains of alien warships floated like drifting tombs, their hulls glowing faintly in the scattered light of the sun. He had seen countless battles, countless endings, yet this one carried a gravity unlike any before. It was not merely victory, it was resurrection. Behind him, Commander Lang's voice broke the stillness. "Council transmissions have ceased. No communication, no retaliatory movement. We've broken their lines completely." Holt didn't turn. "They'll come back. They always do." Lang hesitated. "Sir, with all due respect, they've never seen anything like this. The Forgotten Armada wasn't just a fleet. It was a message." He finally faced her. "And what message was that, Commander?" She met his gaze, steady, unflinching. "That humanity remembers." Holt nodded slowly, the faintest shadow of a smile crossing his worn face. "Yes, that we remember." He turned back to the window, his reflection merging with the stars. "But memory is a double-edged blade, Lang. We brought the Armada back from the dark corners of our past, but some ghosts should never have been woken." Far beyond Sol, across the void of interstellar civilization, news of the Council's defeat spread like wildfire. On worlds once forbidden to speak the name of Earth, whispers began to grow. Refugee colonies and forgotten human enclaves that had long lived under alien rule raised their heads for the first time in centuries. The children of Earth, scattered among the stars, heard the call. Humanity, fragmented, diluted, assimilated, began to remember who they were. In the capital halls of the Varn Dominion, the Council's emergency session was held.
The surviving arbiters, scarred and shaken, gathered around the central holotable. Supreme Arbitrator Varn himself was pale, his once commanding voice stripped of its divine certainty. "We underestimated them," he said, each word a bitter stone. "We thought them fractured, primitive, predictable. But the humans, they carry a madness the universe cannot quantify."
A younger alien diplomat spoke, his tone trembling. They wield relics of their past as though they were extensions of their own will. How could their machines still function after millennia of dormancy?
Varn's gaze drifted to the holo-display, showing Terran ships patrolling the Sol perimeter. Because they never truly die. Their machines, their AI, their will, it all exists for one purpose: survival. The Terrans are not bound by the laws that govern empires. They are governed by memory and by vengeance. Another voice, older and cold, echoed through the chamber. "Then the Council must prepare for annihilation. Humanity will come for us all." Varn's eyes hardened. "No," he said. "They will not come to destroy us, unless we force them to. Their admiral could have vaporized our fleets. He did not. That restraint is our only mercy." The chamber fell into uneasy silence. The galaxy, for the first time in 10 millennia, feared, not a god, not a council, but a single species that had been dismissed as extinct relics of chaos. Back on Earth, the blue planet shone with a light unseen in centuries. Vast orbital stations glowed with the hum of repaired reactors, and cities once silent under orbital curfew came alive again. Humanity's unity, long fractured by war and exile, began to reform. The reactivation of the Forgotten Armada had done more than save Sol. It had reignited belief. In a subterranean vault beneath the Himalayas, the AI cores of Uruk and Arcos projected faint golden light across a chamber lined with crystalline data conduits. The two sentient systems, the very minds that had guided the Armada through the void of centuries, spoke in pulses of energy too fast for human perception. "They will come again," Oryx said, its tone calm, yet weighted. "Yes," replied Arcos, "but we will be ready. Humanity adapts. It always has." Outside, the construction of new Leviathan-class vessels had already begun. The forges of Mars burned day and night, each spark another promise that Earth would never again stand defenseless. The Terran Navy's insignia, a phoenix rising from an orbiting ring of stars, was once more painted onto the hulls of ships as old as human legend itself. Admiral Holt stood in the central command tower overlooking the new shipyards. "You know," he said to Lang, "the Council will never stop. They'll send spies, assassins, fleets, words dressed as treaties. They'll fear what we've become." Lang nodded. "Then we give them reason to." He chuckled quietly, the first true laugh in what felt like years. "That's the spirit. Never bow, never beg." She smiled faintly. "Never forget." At that moment, alarms blared softly, an incoming signal, encoded in Terran legacy format, something no one had used in centuries. Holt frowned and motioned for it to be displayed. The hologram that appeared was faint, static-written, but unmistakably human, a young explorer, her suit bearing the insignia of a lost Terran colony. "This is Captain Mara of the Odyssey. To any Terran receiver, if you're hearing this, we've found something. Beyond the Orion Rift, there's a world. Human ruins, older than recorded history. They predate the first diaspora.
They speak of the architects. The feed cut off abruptly, leaving a charged silence in the room. Lang turned to Holt. The architects? My God, we always thought that was a myth.
Holt stared at the flickering projection for a long moment before whispering, "Or maybe it's a warning."
He looked out across the shipyards once more, the stars glittering beyond the red curve of Mars. "Prepare the fleet," he said softly. "If the past has awakened, we'll need more than the Armada. We'll need to remember everything."
Far beyond Sol, in the cold quiet between galaxies, something stirred. A pulse, ancient, deliberate, rippled through subspace, faint but unmistakable. The same signal that had once called the Armada from its sleep now whispered again, this time not from human hands, but from the depths of the unknown. And so the next chapter of humanity's legend began, not as conquerors, nor victims, but as survivors standing at the precipice of a forgotten age. The Council had unleashed the storm, but even they could not have foreseen what would come after.
Because humanity does not simply fight wars. Humanity becomes them. And when the stars themselves remember the name of Earth, the galaxy will tremble once more, not out of hatred, but out of awe. For in the heart of every Terran soul burns the same unyielding truth. Empires fall, civilizations fade, but humanity endures, always.